Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to Trilliax in the Nighthold.
So this is an encounter that has a demented robot with multiple personalities.
Yes.
Or we'll put it down so it's a little bit more understandable. 3 phases.
Yes.
And all 3 of those phases are quite short, and the boss will simply just cycle through them as the fight goes on. Now in all phases, arcane pools will seep down from the ceiling, and they'll always land near or on top of players. Standing inside these pools just deals ticking damage, so standing in them for long periods of time is probably not a good idea. And although these pools are actually going to be removed later on in the encounter, it's still a good idea to keep away from the middle of the room, because you'll be using this area at a later point in the fight. So just to give you an idea on positioning, you'll want your range and your healers to be roughly around the outsides of the room, and then just slowly rotate the boss around the edges as the pools start to spawn in melee.
Now while you're tanking the boss, throughout every single phase you'll have to deal with Arcane Slash. This is a frontal cone that do a large amount of damage split between a maximum of 2 players. Make sure that both tanks are always hit to prevent any random one-shots on that poor melee DPS that doesn't know where to stand. The slash will also apply a debuff to the main target, and this debuff increases the amount of damage you take by 35% for 30 seconds, and this does stack up. So to stop the stack from becoming too much of an issue, you just simply want to taunt and tank swap on 2. And any tank with 2 stacks should probably be using a cooldown when the slash is being cast, just to make sure that you're safe. So let's get into the specifics of the actual phases. Let's talk about phase 1, otherwise known as his cleaner mode. Trilliax will begin to toss cakes around the room, and these cakes look pretty, but really they're bombs in disguise. For each cake that is active in the room when Trilliax casts Cleansing Rage, the raid will take 1.5 million damage, and he spawns a lot of cakes. So if you don't go around and clean up these cakes, you're one shot. After running over a cake, you will consume it and receive a debuff. This debuff causes you to take ticking damage and be slowed for an entire minute, but more importantly, it prevents you from eating cake again. That means that you'll need to have most of your raid eating cake, making sure the moment that the cakes have spawned that you go and gobble them down. He will also apply debuffs to players that deal pulsing AoE damage around them called Sterilize. Whilst they're under the effects of this debuff, you should make sure you move away from other players to minimize the amount of damage going out.
Shortly after entering cleaner mode, he will then move over into Maniac mode. Whilst in this phase, the boss will be casting his Arcane Slash on the tank way more frequently, as well as starting to deal some ticking damage on the raid. On top of this, he'll also start to bind players together. This effect deals ticking damage to the players, however if you move within close proximity of each other, it will simply stop the damage, but it will not remove the debuff, so you need to stay together until the debuff times out. But most notably, while he's in his Maniac mode, he'll cast Annihilation. He'll jump into the middle of the room, which will actually knock anyone nearby back, hesitate for a second or two, and then he'll fire a huge beam directly in front of him and behind him. The beam will then slowly rotate either to the left or the right, and anyone caught out by the beam will be flat out one shot. That's why it's so important that you keep the middle of the room clean, so then when he does jump into the middle, you have all this space free instead of having all these players stood inside puddles and your healers getting super pissed off. Using speed increases when this ability starts can potentially help, but it isn't really that necessary. You just really need to keep in mind that as the beam is moving around, it can actually move back the opposite way around halfway through its channel, so keep an eye on it. Never be too close to the front of the beam or the back of the beam, otherwise you could be cut in half.
Shortly after his Annihilation cast, he will then enter his last mode, which is phase 3, his Caretaker mode. Immediately going into this phase, he will spawn a bunch of scrubber robots to come and clear up all the arcane patches that are left all over the floor. Now each time these robots pick up an arcane patch, they will gain some energy, and when they reach full energy, they'll go haywire and start a cast and then explode. This explosion will do a large amount of damage to the entire raid, and they definitely have a habit of all exploding within a short period of one another. However, whilst they're casting this ability, you can go over and right click on them, which will interrupt the cast and destroy them. This will cause that player to take a small amount of damage and be shot up into the air, which is obviously far better than having your whole raid be annihilated by these robots. To help you further with these exploding robots, the boss will spawn 3 succulent feasts. If you run over and consume these feasts, it will give you a 3 million damage absorption shield, so it just allows you to go and right click on all the robots without having to really worry about your own health. Whilst these robots are active, the boss will very quickly go back into his cleaner mode. He doesn't really do much in his caretaker mode, but during the cleaner mode, he will be placing out these sterilized debuffs that we was talking about earlier. Now these sterilized debuffs actually interact with the robots in quite a clever way. What they'll do is actually drain energy from the robots, so they'll be around to clear up more patches, and also give them a movement speed increase. So you can have these sort of like souped up hyper robots going around and cleaning everything for you without them exploding immediately. It's totally not necessary, you do not have to do it, but as a ranged DPS or a ranged player, if you're near some robots and you've got the sterilize, then, you could follow them around a little bit if it doesn't, affect your output too much, and that will help clear up the room a little bit more and make the rest of the fight a little bit easier.
And from that point, the fight literally repeats. It'll just go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, back to phase 1, we'll just repeat from there on out until you finally kill him. And that's all there is. Very simple encounter, and who doesn't love fucking cake?
Yeah, it's delicious.
So thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this guide or it helped you out in one way or another, then do drop down a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you know when we've uploaded. And a big shout out to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You guys are the best. Thank you so much, and we shall see you all in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.